What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin, John.
And we have an album review, and one that is definitely a little bit different, even though this band does fit in the metal kind of category, but I don't know, maybe not this one. We are going to go over the latest offering from Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats, Nell Ora Blu. This also comes out on the 10th of May on Rise Above Records. This band formed in 2009 in England. This is their 6th album overall. I became a fan with their second album, Bloodlust, and then I just kept following up with all the albums after that. Mind Control, I think, is an absolute banger, too. And, all right, to describe this band's sound pre this album, because this one's really different, it's more like kind of like straightforward retro rock / doom metal. It's kind of along the lines of bands like Graveyard, where it is like fiercely 70s inspired, but definitely a little bit more dark and occult. And this band has kind of a fascination with all things analog. I believe all of their stuff is analog in terms of like the recording. And this band loves like Black Sabbath and stuff like that just about as much as they love Hammer horror movies, or in this case, Italian thrillers, which is what this one's all about.
I've heard of this band, but I'd never jammed any of their stuff. And to be honest, even with the description of what you just described it as, is, you know, analog kind of doom metal meets, like, I don't know. It never even really crossed my radar. Again, I'd heard of them, but I thought, like, I don't know. Even the name didn't jive with me, so I just kind of skipped it. But this is notably different from your description. Now, something I want to call out, first of all the song titles except for one, and this is a double album, so there's 19 songs. All the song titles except for one are in Italian, so bear with us as we call out titles of songs. Oh my God,
it's bad. Like, I'm about as Italian as Olive Garden, so yeah. My knowledge of foreign languages is already struggling, so forgive us as we try to get through those. But this is wildly different than what I expected. I had the previous albums to kind of go by, and I've really enjoyed this band's sound, and I still enjoy this band's sound, but this is kind of a massive undertaking because, I mean, I'll just say it, this band kind of rescored like a bunch of old Italian thrillers, maybe horror movies. It sounds more like thrillers, like detective stories and like a killer's on the loose. Like, even if you look at the album cover here, it's a gentleman on a payphone, and believe me, you're going to hear lots of phones ringing on here. And this whole album, it feels like it follows, I mean, at least one film, maybe multiple films, but it is not set up like any of their albums where, you know, you have individual songs that are singles. There's definitely a couple on here that stand out on their own.
Yeah.
But a lot of this flows like the score to a movie, and the way it is set up in a very cinematic fashion where you kind of get like the peaks and valleys of the whole movie, like first act, second act, third act, etc.
Even based on that description, I don't think that the first song on this record really sets up the rest of the record. I like the first song, but the first song is more of like spacey and kind of gothic and kind of psychedelic. I mean, there's still some tropes in even this song that appear later in the record, but I don't know if the first song sets it up correctly.
Yeah, honestly, it kind of sounds like, you know, the opening of Clockwork Orange. Like, you get this big wall of synths. They're definitely very analog. They're a little bit crispy and kind of grainy sounding. And then you get these big droning riffs that come in behind them. And I don't know, the whole vibe is like Fabio Frizzi working with Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very strange. Like, you definitely get like that unsettling, dark sort of vibe to it. But it's also very spacey and kind of cosmic. There's some really cool bass lines, which, believe me, the bass work on here is absolutely amazing. And that kind of leads me to probably one of the main differences between this and any previous works is this is not very guitar driven.
Not at all.
Yeah, this is more driven by atmosphere, synths, and the rhythm section, namely the bass. The bass work on here is absolutely amazing. Like, very smooth, very textured.
Sultry, sexy.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. And the drums, too. There's not even really rock beats. Most of it's jazz drums and really fat, funky drums.
Yeah.
And it,
The second track, and why not, I'll take a crack at it. Giestesia di strada lavora fino alla morte. Probably screwed up all of that. You get introduced to, again, like a big theme on here with like sections of the movie and settings and such. There's like some city noises, traffic, you hear someone walking, and behind that comes this very jazzy rhythm with this cool kind of like ghost note fill. And me listening to this with a drummer, instantly I saw his ears perk up. I was like, ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Is it sexy time behind the kit?
Spend a lot of time just going, oh, yeah.
It's very chill, but it's very, I don't know, kind of haunting. Like the vocals for this band have always been just very ghostly. Like they're in a higher register, but I think it's like maybe pitch corrected. And there's always like a strange kind of rough filter on them to make them sound, again, more crisp. And as this album goes on, you know, it just gets darker and weirder. And I feel like the movie kind of changes. You know, it goes from, again, like something that seems a little bit more horror-esque to something that is more of a noirish thriller. And, I mean, either way, like, the vibe on the synths almost across the board is just very Goblin-esque. Like, you know, this sounds like a Dario Argento flick. I mean, it would probably work really well. Who knows, the movie they are rescoring or repurposing in this might be an Argento flick. Baseline, if there's a special edition of this album, it should come with a fog machine and a VHS copy of Suspiria. Like, that's the vibe on a good chunk of this. And a lot of the first half, I would say, is more like setting and exposition. It's more about the atmosphere and kind of letting you know what the themes are. And the themes definitely involve a phone. Like, there's phone ringing all over here, and rotary dials, which is a noise that a lot of people younger than us probably wouldn't even recognize.
My parents had a rotary phone when I was growing up, and I used to love dialing the operator as a kid. I'm sure I probably dialed the operator, I don't know, 500 times throughout the course of my younger years.
Kid, go to bed.
Because rotary phones were neat. Yeah, and outside of that, too, vocally, I mean, you get a lot of, like, choirs and a lot of just like droning tones, but a majority of the vocals per se are all phone calls, and they're usually some guy pissed off in Italian.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I heard bastardo a couple of times.
Bastardo!
And man, I forgot how hard you could hang up an old rotary phone. Like, they are slamming that thing. But again, like, this is a constantly shifting sort of vibe, much like a movie. Again, the first part, again, very much like the setup. Like, here's the scenes. It's a cityscape. We're also kind of on a beach occasionally, too. It's also very dark and spooky in some spots. La Vipera, or Vipera, I don't know. The Viper, we'll just call it that. Very Tarantino-ish.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the entire time I was listening to this, I was thinking of Urge Overkill and, well, Salma Hayek doing a very, very sexy dance.
Yep, and Dust Till Dawn, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I immediately got that vibe.
I know she's gonna kill me, but I'm totally okay with it.
And speaking of switchovers, after someone gets violently hung up on from the rotary phone, you want to go into the bar. Songs like Il Tesoro de Sardinia and the title track Nell Ora Blu. I don't know if I said that right, but I'm going to roll with it.
Probably neither one.
Sexy Italian. These are straight up in an old, seedy dive bar. I mean, we're talking blue lights and stale secondhand smoke and Ron Burgundy busting out his Yaz flute. It's that vibe. And just the sexiest of bass.
And the bass and the drums just kind of run that song. Like, you know, after you get past the phone call to kind of set up the mood, you know, it just gets taken over by the rhythm section. And that's kind of the thing I like on here. I was initially a little like, wow, man, the guitars are kind of secondary on here. Like, they're more about the atmosphere. But when they do get a chance to, like, really supply some cool atmosphere, like, dude, the clean guitars on this song are absolutely beautiful. And then you get these big vocal harmonies, and it's not necessarily saying words, it's just oohs and ahs.
Yeah.
But it kind of adds this sort of ghostly effect. And the way the song builds, it's just kind of steadily in layers. Like, you get strings that come in, a saxophone because it wasn't sexy enough. And honestly, it's almost like a post-metal sort of like dynamic in terms of building in layers and deconstructing and constructing the song, like those sorts of dynamics. It's almost like a 70s psychedelic rock version of like a Russian circle song. But at the same time, it also has a vibe kind of like Cars Moving in Stereo, which just has that kind of like, you know, fun, dark night drive alone on the highway. Just like, now we're just going to chill and listen to this. Maybe break the speed limit.
A lot of this is killer night drive music. The title track is straight up like Miles Davis in a CD bar. Muted trumpet even. It's actually quite a beautiful jam. Not a lot of drum work going on, but it really just kind of sets up that further kind of dark, ominous night.
Where you met the lady at the bar and you're taking her back to your place. Even though you're on the case, you shouldn't be flirting with her. She's married. Anyway, back to the review. I just had to do that because a lot of this feels like there should be like some sort of like detective narrative over it. And that vibe in particular is executed to almost perfection. On the song, oh my God, forgive me, this is a sentence here. Pomeriggio di Novembre nel Parco Oci che Servano, maybe? That song, I mean, honestly, I feel like I'm just watching the credits to like Kojak or something like that. It is 100% that noir detective sound. You get the soft horns in it, the great bass and drums. It's just a little bit more like dirty. Like it sounds like the New York streets at night.
And this is the only time you get words spoken in English. That female choir, they're saying something in English. It was the first time I understood anything anyone said.
At that point, I wasn't even paying attention to any of the dialogue because I hadn't understood it to any point. I heard Bastardo once, and I just hear people violently hanging up on phones. So I kind of like checked out on the dialogue. But the dialogue does move this along, again, at kind of like a cinematic pace. And again, like a movie, it bounces around a lot. Again, you know, love-making sections, more detective work stuff, and occasionally some action sequences.
Yeah, occasionally chasing criminals. I think in Guidando Veloci Verso La Campagna, I think. This one is a straight up foot chase through an outdoor market, and it's like an old like episode of Chips or early Dragnet or something. They're full on chasing this dude. There's hand drums and bongos.
I know, I got like Shaft and oddly enough, The People's Court. Dun, dun, dun,
oh,
dun.
yeah.
But it has that, like the hand drums, like you can kind of like even see the scene, like, you know, the detective emerges looking around the crowd for his, you know, quarry. You know, they do a quick pan in, he's looking around, points him out, the guy runs, tips over a fruit cart. Yeah, I mean, it's a 70s cop drama, and they capture the vibe so damn well. And I love just this weird blend on here. Like, there's definitely 70s rock vibes still, a lot of 60s psychedelia, like there's... You know, Iron Butterfly kind of all over this too. And oddly enough, like if ELO had taken a much darker turn in their career, it kind of has that just in terms of like all the extra instrumentation.
Yeah.
Strings, horns, there's flutes on here, vocal layers, loads of synths. And it is all used very effectively to move along these songs and again, kind of explore the different moody shifts within this cinematic universe that this band has created here.
There is one song, maybe something that could have been released as a single.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something to kind of turn your ear on and go, okay, this is going to jam. Solo La Morte tu Amanata actually sounds to me like Black Sabbath covering Iron Maiden.
Yeah, it's probably the most guitar-driven song on the album. And like the guitar tone is... Well, it's pretty unique, especially by today's standards, because, again, this band is all analog. It's that old, heavy sound where it's like a little bit squawky and dirty. And instead of having that more full, rich sound that came in like the late 70s and early 80s, it is pretty much just like, listen, we'll just crank this and get it as loud as we can get. It's probably going to come off fuzzy and squawky, but... You know, we're trying to capture that very particular vibe. Like a whole generation of parents being upset because their kids are listening to that doper counterculture music. But they nail it. And they frequently layer the guitars to make them heavy. And honestly, like the bass, the low end really kind of helps drive it. Like there's just a great bass line in that song. And this one has like more pronounced vocals because, again, like vocals... aren't necessarily a huge part of this. A lot of this is more driven by music and atmosphere. And I like the fact that they really committed to this vibe because this album is meticulously crafted. Like every little nuance, every little crevice of sound here is filled with something that drives it. There's no real breaks in between the tracks. They go into one another.
Yeah, they melt into each other. As we were talking earlier, like 100% you can see scenes of movies in your head, like the foot chase, or like the seedy dark bars, or like the funky jazz time, kind of sexy time, or because most of it's like phone calls, I get a lot of Black Christmas vibes.
Yeah.
Like a guy calling to a bunch of women saying, I'm going to kill you. And like, if you've never seen Black Christmas, check it out, especially the 1974 version with Margot Kidder. But yeah, just a lot of stuff like that. Like, you could actually see it, and the music follows along to, you know, what I've seen before.
And another thing I think that's cool is you don't hear a lot of like heavier bands take on jazz in a more relaxed form. It's generally in a more aggressive form. Like, I mean, the first band that kind of comes to mind is Imperial Triumphant, but
sure,
this is like Imperial Triumphant if you took away like all the hallucinogens and just gave them like quaaludes and ether. Slow it down. Let's just get a little bit moody.
I mean, it's more like White Ward, their last album, like the first kind of jazzy break in Leviathan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more like that. I got a lot of vibes from bands like Lettuce, Thievery Corporation. If you've never heard of them, I wouldn't expect many metalheads to hear of that band, but a lot of it's just like jazzy, kind of almost trip-hop, noirish.
Oh, very noirish.
Yeah.
As far as any negatives on here, I do have some, even though I think the listening experience in here is just awesome. Like, front to back, it is a little bit long-winded, and I do think there are points where they kind of just drone on the, you know, dialogue and the atmosphere before getting into the songs. I'm just not going to say the song titles because I can. Tracks 2, 5, and 10, I think they spend a little bit too much time in terms of, I guess, what you would call the exposition section of the album. And, you know, you get down to these jams that I feel like they're just kind of cut off. There's also moments on here where I kind of want to hear them just rock out on this one moment they are on. And they, again, spend a lot of time kind of bookending it with atmosphere. But the atmosphere is kind of necessary in a way to keep this going because it's constantly sort of transitional. Because, again, there are no track breaks between the songs.
Yeah, there really aren't.
Right into one another. It is a pretty long listen, though, and, you know, there are definitely some transitional tracks that I think it didn't do very much. And honestly, like, I like the end. The end is sort of, I feel like, more somber and reflective. Like, this movie didn't feel like it had a happy ending. But it feels like it kind of loses a little bit of steam towards the end. Like, it takes on a more gothic, sinister approach. And, I don't know, like, the payoff wasn't quite there overall. You know, the last track even kind of runs like the closing credits.
Yeah.
But, I mean, outside of that, I really dug this.
Yeah. I don't really have a lot of negatives either. It does tend to drag a little bit, and especially with all the phone calls. Like the only song in English, Cocktail Party. Like,
it's a phone call.
It's a phone call. It wasn't even a party. Like, I didn't hear glasses clanking or any of that. But yeah, there's like, I don't know, probably, 6 phone calls, I think.
Yeah.
And a lot of times those tracks don't necessarily go anywhere other than to establish that there's a guy on the phone getting increasingly angrier.
Yeah.
Like, it is something you can hear. So, I mean, I guess if it were to score an actual movie, like, you could kind of see the flow of things. But there's quite a few of them, and I just think that some of them, especially the ones that don't really have any musical value to them, like, you're always going to get some sort of atmosphere or ambience or even little, like, light bits of melody that, again, are either synths or light guitar, but, like, some of them don't really do anything.
Yeah, Sergei Anche Il Sol, sure. That song in particular, like, I mean, it has, like, at least what it sounds like, sort of like the end of the film sort of vibe. Like, there's a gunshot at the end.
Yep.
Someone died. Hopefully it was the bad guy. But my issue is it feels like it just kind of takes too long to get there, and it doesn't have, like, the big climactic end that I guess I want. Like, the gunshot kind of came out of nowhere, and it was kind of a relief to hear something other than a phone call. But, I don't know. Like, that just kind of left me hanging at the end. But, I mean, again, overall, man, they committed to this.
Yeah.
This is a huge endeavor. and it is meticulously crafted across the board. And for the most part, I really dig this. So overall, I'm going to give it 3.5 stars now. I am going to order this. I'm going to listen to it more. And I think maybe like all the additional stuff will probably sink in more. But, you know, there is some extra stuff that I probably would have trimmed on here, even though it might have hampered the flow of it. I don't know. I don't feel like all those phone calls were important. Like, it was probably just like, hey, did you pick up groceries? Like, no, I didn't. Okay, well, go get celery. But for the most part, I would say like this is easily this band's most immersive, different album yet, and it's different in a really good way. Like, this is a huge undertaking, and especially with all the instrumentation on here, like,
yeah,
this goes beyond, I think, anything they've done. Strings, horns, you know, all the samples kind of moving this along. This is just kind of like a really cool experience just to sit back and jam. Now, granted, I went in with some decidedly different expectations. Like, I kind of wanted some more rockers in there, but I mean, overall, I was pretty pleased with this. I think this is a really solid listen overall. If you're a big fan of, oh God, I don't know, any number of things, like definitely 70s and late 60s psychedelic rock.
Yeah.
Kind of jazz.
Yep.
Not necessarily jazz fusion too, like just kind of jazz.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just check this out. This is just, I don't know, truly the most different thing that this band has ever put out.
I'm going to give this a 4. Coming into this, I was told something much different, and I was ready for kind of a doomy stoner jam. It's been a very long day for me, so I was looking forward to rocking out in stoner land. This is definitely still stoner land, but it's in the 60s and the early 70s, and you're taking hallucinogenics for sure.
But you're also a cop on the beat.
Right. But you're also a detective. And you're also in some very unfortunate parts of town, but you're enjoying yourself, and there's a lot of whiskey. This is grossly entertaining, especially for what it is. You know what I need to do? I think what I really need to do is go home and look up all of these titles and translate them into English, and it might explain the story a little bit better. But this is legit, I think, scoring a movie, or a number of movies, or a recreation of a number of movies. I'm not 100%, but what I did dig for the most part was all of that super awesome sexy bass and all the fat drum beats, and there's a bunch of pretty melodies. Like, there's no way to really describe this because it's not typical. Just think of a jazz bar and the game LA Noire and any number of old 70s like Fulci movies and Argento, yeah, I was gonna say Argento, and you know, watching these movies without the subtitles, so you're extra confused. I need to listen to this again. In fact, I'm probably gonna listen to it again a couple more times because there's a bunch of really sweet shit on here. But yeah, overall 4 stars if you're a fan of a bunch of old psychedelic bands and Goblin for sure.
Yeah,
and think about things like Tangerine Dream, but done in a jazz format. Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's a really good listen. I had a great time.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon if you'd like to help us out there. There's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats, too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
And certainly, last but not least, we just want to thank you guys, to all our supporters and subscribers and whatnot. You've made Thralls of Metal into a gigantic experience that I never ever thought that there would be, and we appreciate you for it. Tons of content coming your way, album reviews, discography rankings. Meshuggah's coming up next. We're probably going to get to it after we get back from Maryland Death Fest, which is going to be the best event in the whole wide world, although we haven't been outside of the States. It's not important. But the best event, one of the best events that we've ever been to. Yeah. We're going to Maryland Death Fest, and we're going to hang out. If you see us out there, provided we can hear you and there's not a band playing, please come up and say hello. We're pretty cordial individuals, I guess. You know, we love to talk to you. We love to see you. Anyway, tons of stuff. Thank you. I'm going to stop babbling. I've been awake for entirely too long. Nick, tell them more.
Yeah, you guys absolutely rule. And yeah, tons of stuff coming your way. So one more big thank you, because you guys are awesome. And we will catch you later.